This happened a few years ago on Christmas. At the time, I was just a kid, and as I grew up, I gradually became aware of how messed up my family was. On the surface, everything was fine. I had a little sister, a mom, and a dad who took care of us. Perfect, right? Well, not really. My parents were always fighting. My dad was arrested for being violent with my mom on multiple occasions, but no matter what he did to her, she always took him back. I just chalked it up to them trying to hold it together for me and my sister, but something much darker was going on. By the time I was a teenager, I figured it out. They both had serious drinking problems. Every time my dad got drunk, he became angry and violent, and my mom would get drunk just to cope with him. It was an ongoing deadly cycle, and me and my sister didn't really know what to do about it. However, on the night of Christmas Eve, my parents threw a party. They hosted some neighbors and relatives to trade gifts, play games, share food, and have a good time together. It was all going fine until the drinking started. Once night fell, the conversations turned to arguments, then to fighting. My dad started swinging at multiple people at the house. People tried to break it up, but whatever they did or said just fanned the flames. Eventually, my mom started begging everyone to leave before things escalated. Our relatives were hesitant, but little by little, everyone left, with no one else around. My dad screamed at us to go to our room, so we did. The arguing and shouting between my parents didn't stop though. They kept going at it all night, from our beds. All we could hear was fighting. My sister and I were terrified, but we had also become numb to it. We had Christmas morning to look forward to. It kept us sane until the screaming subsided a few hours later. Then we finally passed out. The next morning, it was Christmas, and things were oddly quiet, so we got up and carefully made our way downstairs. At the bottom of the steps, we met our parents, who were already waiting for us in the living room. Our mom was sitting on the couch, wearing sunglasses for some reason. Our dad, however, was standing right by the tree, with a wide beaming smile on his face. It was so unnatural. My sister and I hesitated to approach the Christmas tree. Our dad had to wave us over to open our presents. We looked to our mom for confirmation, but she just sat there without acknowledging our existence. I really tried to open my present, act surprised, but when my forced reaction was met by complete silence from my mother, I snapped.
Dad, why is Mom wearing sunglasses inside? And why isn't she saying anything?
She's drunk from last night. She'll be awake shortly.
Mom, what the hell? Why are you drinking if you can't even wake up on time for Christmas? Can't you put the goddamn bottle down? Well, is that it? You just gonna ignore me? Say something!
Son, I think she passed out. She can't even hear you.
Well, good going, Mom! You ruined Christmas!
I couldn't take it anymore. I had to remove myself from the situation. I thought my dad would follow me into my room or demand that I come back out, but he didn't. He kept his attention on my sister. I could hear him telling her again and again, "Keep going. Open your presents, baby." I felt bad for blowing up on my mom in front of my sister, but that would pale in comparison to what I would soon feel. I didn't leave my room all day. I was too angry. Eventually, my sister came to hide in our room with me for the rest of the night. But then all hell broke loose a few hours later. Suddenly, we heard our dad screaming. He was wailing, crying out in pain. We ran to see what was wrong with him, and that's when we saw him breaking down next to my mom. He kept saying she was dead as he cradled her in his arms, and I could tell by then that he was right. Her body was gray, swollen, and stiff. My mom was dead. Soon, an ambulance came and took her body away, but the cops that showed up wouldn't leave. They multiplied, and before we knew it, cops were swarming our house, and then they took our dad away too. After we were relocated to our grandmother's house, we learned the truth. Our dad confessed to killing our mom. He strangled her on the night of Christmas Eve after hours of arguing. What that meant slowly set into my traumatized mind. He killed her, then dragged her body onto the couch, propped her up, put sunglasses over her lifeless eyes, and made my sister and I open presents in front of her corpse. Ever since then, we've lived with our relatives while our dad is in prison. I still feel this immense guilt and shame for cussing her out, not realizing she was dead the entire time. One of the most downright disturbing Christmas incidences was when a man videotaped his stepchildren opening Christmas presents with their dead mother propped up on the couch. William Wallace, 39, was convicted of second-degree murder for the Christmas Day 2011 death of 26-year-old Zazelle Preston. Jurors began deliberating Tuesday and reached a verdict the next morning. The victim's 2 daughters from a prior relationship and the couple's baby were in the apartment at the time their mother passed. Authorities determined Preston died at about 1 a.m., but Wallace propped up her body on the couch while he videotaped the girls opening presents later that morning. Wallace called 911 at around 9:30 a.m. that Christmas morning to report his wife needed medical help, according to police. Wallace has a known history for going to jail in the past because of past physical altercations with the victim. 3 days before the victim's death, she told family members she wanted to leave Wallace, but unfortunately, it was too late.
Every year I would drive out of town to visit my relatives for Christmas. The house was about an hour-and-a-half drive. To be honest, I was used to the drive, but the last time I went, I dealt with the heaviest snowstorm of my life. During the middle of the day, I could barely see past my headlights. Then, on some random stretch of road in the middle of goddamn nowhere, my car broke down. I pulled over and tried restarting it, but I got nothing. I stepped out and popped the hood open, but I couldn't see what was wrong. I didn't have any phone service either, and as long as I waited, nobody came down the road. Already running out of options, the sun began to set on me, and I became desperate as hell. I looked into the woods, searching for a driveway, a mailbox, anything. There was something out there, a faint, flickering red and green light. I knew I could still reach it, so rather than risk freezing to death in my car overnight, I headed for the lights. Of course, they turned out to be deeper into the forest than I anticipated. It was too late to turn back, though, so I pressed forward. I sincerely hoped I was not heading for some empty industrial building, but when I finally came to a clearing, I was pleasantly surprised. In my hour of need, I had stumbled upon a gingerbread house. It was the nicest one I'd ever seen, as decorated as any miniature, but life-size. And there were lights on, too. Given how secluded an area I was in, it seemed like luck was on my side. With a numb, nearly frostbitten smile, I knocked on the door.
Wow! I can't believe it!
What do you want?
I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you a real gingerbread man?
Piss off!
Wait, I'm sorry. That's not why I'm here. I need help. Really, my car broke down on the road up there and I'm freezing to death. I just need to borrow your phone or get a lift or anything you can do to help me, please.
You think people just do things for free out here?
Well, no. I mean, I'll pay you if you want. I really need your help. All right. Here, that's all the cash I brought for my trip. $200.
All right, get inside.
Oh, thank you.
But don't touch anything! The gingerbread man living in that house looked like the real thing, but he had none of the jolly attitude. Still, he let me into his house before I froze to death, albeit with some strict stipulations. I was allowed to sit by the fireplace and warm up, and that was it. Meanwhile, the gingerbread man made me hand over my keys, offering to go out and fix the car by himself. Understandably, I was hesitant to let go of my keys, but I figured since I was going to be alone in his house, it wouldn't make sense for him to steal my car. After stashing my money away, he went out in the snowstorm and started making his way to my car. At first, I obeyed the gingerbread man's rules. I sat by the fire and warmed up, but after some time, I got nosy and decided to explore his house. I figured he was at my car, still figuring things out. Eventually, I could no longer resist the urge, so I got up and crept down the hallway. I wanted to peek behind its doors and uncover the secrets of this gingerbread house. If I didn't leave a trace, I could sit back down at the fireplace before the gingerbread man got back.
I'm sorry, I didn't...
I thought I told you to stay put! Ah!
given me an excuse to give you my candy cane, kill you, and make sure nobody ever finds out.
Can't stand Five Nights at Freddy's. I lived through the nightmare those games portray, so there is nothing entertaining about them to me. People think it's based on Chuck E. Cheese, but that's just the aesthetic. The truth is, Five Nights at Freddy's is based on a horrific true story, and I was unlucky enough to be at the center of it. Many years ago, I was just a little kid, a scared orphaned boy at the mercy of the foster care system. I was brought into a foster home run by an old retired couple. The grandma-grandpa pair already had multiple foster kids in their care. They were nice, but during our very first conversation, I knew there was something off about them.
Who are you? Can you tell me your name, mister? I know you're scared, little fella, but I promise you're going to fit right in.
Do you like teddy bears? Mm-hmm. Do you want to see one? Okay. All right, then. Why don't you follow me?
I thought they were going to give me a new stuffed animal as a welcoming gift, but instead, I was shown their creations. 5 gigantic animal costumes were sitting around the house, each of them some kind of home-sewn amalgamation of different parts. I had no idea if they were supposed to be bears or rabbits, so I just pretended they were a kind of animal I hadn't learned about yet. In fact, I couldn't even look at them. Something about it just creeped me the hell out. I knew I made the right call when I finally got to talk to some other kids. According to them, our foster parents worked hard to create them just so the kids had something cool to look at or play with when walking around the house. Later on, I made friends with a kid I'll just call Sean. We quickly became close as we shared a room and a teacher at school. We did pretty much everything together. I was happy to have a friend as well as a new home, but the longer I lived there, the worse things seemed to get. Gradually, a stench built up in every room and every corner of the house. Nobody could figure out where it was coming from. Beyond our general living conditions, creepy things were happening more and more. At night, I could hear noises outside my room. They sounded like distant screams somewhere, but I was too scared to leave my room to check. Along with everyone else, I started to lose sleep. I was wide awake every night, trying my hardest not to listen to those horrible noises, but I always failed, leaving me falling asleep all day at school. One day, my friend Sean got sick. I got out of bed and went to get him up so we could get ready together, but he could barely keep his eyes open. I didn't know what was wrong with him. Our foster parents said he was running a fever, so he would have to stay home. I didn't want to go to school alone, but I didn't have a choice. When school was done, I went home. Sadly, the second I walked through the door, both my foster parents were right there waiting for me with awful news. They told me Sean had been taken out of the foster program. He was gone. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Devastated, I went to my room to cry for a while, but it was about to get so much worse than I ever could have imagined. The second I walked into my room, I saw it. There was a new monstrous costume sitting in the middle of the floor, and its eyes, they were human. They were familiar. I'd seen those eyes before just that morning, but now they were hidden behind all these wrong, fake animal parts. I ran right down the stairs and out of that nightmare house before anyone could catch me. The first person I ran into, I begged them to call the cops. Finally, the police searched the house, and my foster parents were arrested when the grisly truth was unearthed. All the costumes in the house were filled with corpses. Those demonic people had been sewing their foster children into these animal suits, cutting and twisting and breaking their bodies, reforming them with brutal amateur surgery into the abominations I was living with. The foster care program was just their scheme to collect more victims. The worst part is what they did to my friend Sean. They made him sick and helpless by overdosing him with medications, then put him through hell to make him fit into that costume, placing him in our room for me to discover like it was some kind of sick joke. But unfortunately for them, my mind hadn't yet been broken. Not completely anyway. I knew Sean was in there, and I wasn't going to stick around to share his fate. The news of this story shocked the small town I lived in, but this all happened before the days of the internet, so it managed to stay our town's darkest secret. That was until someone turned my most traumatic experience into Five Nights at Freddy's and put it on blast for the whole world to see. Thanks to those games, I now face constant reminders of what happened. This FNAF story was inspired by a viral incident involving a couple named Martha and Eugene Grimes, who were known for fostering children and aiding the needy, but were really harboring dark secrets in their Victorian home. A series of disturbing photos showcases the Grimes couple, terrified victims, and horrifying bear costumes, which were allegedly what the Grimes couple used as taxidermy for their victims. It was said that the couple took out dozens of foster children by sewing them into animal costumes. Guests seeking refuge were sedated by the Grimes and forcibly stitched into animal costumes, turned into unwilling performers for a perverse entertainment. The Grimes' grotesque charade continued undetected for 18 years, the truth hidden by the couple's veneer of generosity and community spirit. The horrors were unearthed in 2022 when a former foster child, triggered by the game Five Nights at Freddy's, recalled the trauma, leading to a shocking investigation. As the investigation deepened, authorities uncovered a mass grave on the property's outskirts. Amidst the overgrowth, many victims were found, still grotesquely bound within their costume prisons. This happened on the night of Christmas Eve. My family was throwing a party, and those were always a blast. For everyone else, it was just like any other Christmas party. For me, however, it was a little more special. This was the first night I felt genuinely happy in over a year, and the beginning of a brand new chapter of my life after finally putting an end to the last one, which had taken a heavy toll. It had all started with my ex-husband Bruce. When we married, he was caring and supportive, but shortly after just a few short months, he showed his true colors. He became controlling, psychotic, and violent. It was like a switch flipped off inside him, because everything was just off about him, and not the person I once knew. My family would advise that I get a divorce, but I was too afraid of what the guy might do. Eventually, though, I went with my family's advice and finally got the divorce from Bruce. But the second it was finalized, Bruce went off the deep end, and his paranoia transformed into psychosis, showcasing his violent tendencies.
You daughter of a bitch! I hate your guts! I wish you never existed!
After the divorce, I decided to file a restraining order for my safety, which seemed to finally put an end to the whole ordeal and allow me to move on with my life. And since that day, I never saw Bruce. However, there was just one problem. Bruce's brother literally lived right across the street from me. I wasn't too worried about it, however, because the two never really saw eye to eye, so I doubted he would take a strong side in the divorce, let alone let him in his house. That being said, Christmas was just around the corner, so I gathered all my family and friends together by hosting a Christmas Eve party at my place. To be honest, I was kinda worried about seeing Bruce or anyone related to him since they were literally across the street from us, but I tried to disregard any of that and just enjoy my guests' company. With that in mind, the Christmas Eve party was going well. Everyone ate, played games, opened presents, made gingerbread houses, took pictures, surrounded the Christmas tree, and even snuggled up by the fireplace to keep warm. Everything was going great, and there was not an ounce of drama. Then, out of nowhere, a booming sound cut through everything. We all stopped and looked at the front door. It was still swinging from the person that had just barged through it. The person standing in front of everyone was wearing a Santa Claus suit with a giant sack over his shoulder. For a moment, we were all just a bit shocked, wondering if someone had hired a Santa for the little ones, or if this was just some weirdo off the street. But when the man behind the beard locked eyes with me, I realized the truth, as everyone was still deciding if they should be cheering or scared. I knew it was my ex-husband, Bruce. I was terrified, yet also furious. I knew my family had my back, but I still wanted to deal with this myself as swiftly as possible. I was the first to get up and confront Bruce, hoping there was still a chance to get him to leave before things got any worse.
Bruce? What are you doing here? Don't you remember what the court said? 500 feet.
I remember how you cheated me out of every dollar I had. You gold-digging bitch.
Watch it, man. Don't touch her.
Oh, I'm not gonna touch her. I just came to say...
I hope you rot in hell, along with every thieving, scum-sucking waste of flesh in this room! You took everything from me! Your soul will die 1,000 screaming deaths in agony for every second of shit you put me through!
Hey! Leave her alone or I'll call the cops! Not this time.
And why is that?
I said not before I give you all the presents I brought.
No, nuh-uh. No way, dude. Just pick up your shit and leave. We're begging you.
No, please! Bruce, I'm begging you!
The Covina massacre occurred on Christmas Eve 2008, when Bruce Jeffrey Pardon, a disgruntled ex-husband dressed up as Santa Claus, entered a property belonging to his former in-laws in Covina, California, and took out the 9 people before setting the house on fire, and then doing the unthinkable to himself later on at his brother's residence in the early hours of Christmas Day. Police speculated that Pardo's divorce, which had been finalized only 1 week before the killings, was a factor in why Pardo had decided to take out his ex-wife and her relatives. This happened around Christmas. I live alone with my daughter in a rather secluded and heavily wooded area. We only have a handful of neighbors, mostly people that live in cottage type of houses like us. I work from home, so I only leave the property to drop off or pick up my daughter, and of course for groceries and stuff like that. Not much goes on in the area, which is why I allow my daughter to play in the woods with her friends nearby, as long as she comes home before the curfew I set out for her. One evening, however, something went wrong. My daughter wasn't answering my calls or texts. I was worried as hell. After the recent snowfall, I suspected her and her friends were just trying to push their luck with the curfew. I sat out on the front porch, half pissed off and half worried to death, waiting for her to come home.
Hey, you're late.
I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I just lost track of time.
How do you lose track of the sun?
Well, actually, we were inside mostly.
Inside? Whose house was it? I want to know who to call.
It wasn't anyone's house.
Then where were you?
You're not gonna believe me, but we found a real-life gingerbread house in the woods.
What?
There was even a gingerbread man living inside it. We asked if we could play in his house and he said we could, but only has his fairies. So, we dressed up as fairies and then played inside for like 3 hours.
And during all this time, you didn't think to look at your phone even once?
Well, the gingerbread man said fairies aren't supposed to have phones.
You're getting too old to be this bad at lying. Just get inside before you freeze to death.
Obviously, the whole gingerbread bullcrap seemed a little far-fetched. Over the course of the rest of the night, I pressed her about it, yet she stuck to her guns. Eventually, I just went along with it, but it never sat right with me. I just didn't want it to blow up into a whole thing she would end up hating me forever for. The very next evening though, when she brought it up again, I was not going to let it slide. Interestingly, she told me about it beforehand as if she was asking for permission to go to this alleged gingerbread house. Even though it was a little later than I usually let her go out, I decided to agree to it, just to see where it led. When she left, I secretly followed her. At first, she went down the same old path towards the neighbors, but after she met up with her friends, they took an odd turn. It was down a trail that I was not familiar with. It became narrower as the evening turned darker. Then suddenly, the girls stopped. Quickly, I hid behind a tree before they spotted me. When they started talking again, I took a peek, and sure enough, in spite of everything I was thinking, there was an honest-to-God, real-life gingerbread house right there, in the middle of the woods, 10 feet off the ground, but built like something straight out of a fairy tale. I couldn't believe my eyes, but my astonishment was far from over. Standing up under the house, the girls dragged the box into the open. From it, they pulled out cheap fairy costumes and put them on. Then, they started climbing up the ladder to the entrance. I couldn't get a good look at them from the ground, but someone opened the door for them. Then they disappeared inside. At this point, I was so freaked out. I felt like I didn't have a choice but to see what was going on in there. So I got out from my hiding spot and started making my way up. As I climbed the ladder, I could hear the girls cheering and shrieking like they were playing, but there was another voice in there, and for the first time, I started to think this gingerbread man might actually be real. However, once I got up on the porch and peered through the window, I saw a very different sight. There was but one tiny room, covered wall to wall in photos of girls just like my own. She and her friends were standing in the center of the room in their fairy outfits. Not standing, but posing for someone in the corner. And who else could it have been but a fat old man in a dingy gingerbread costume, taking pictures of them. When I realized what had truly been happening the whole time, I lost control and attacked the bastard.
You piece of shit! Stop! Stop! It's just pictures! That's bullshit! I'll kill you!
Once I exhausted myself beating the brakes off that sick freak, I used my last remaining energy to restrain him until the police arrived. It only took them one look to know what was up. Then they arrested him. He was charged and convicted, but probably for only a fraction of the despicable things he did in that so-called gingerbread house. I'm glad that man's horrible trap is no longer endangering anyone, but I just wish it could have been stopped before my daughter got caught up in it. Till this day, I wish I could have kept her away from ever going in there. A secret gingerbread house deep in the forest sounds like something from a fairy tale, but investigators in Seattle say the one they found was anything but. Now, 56-year-old Daniel Wood faces charges of possession of content of young individuals. An employee for Washington's Natural Resources discovered bedding, food, and a large amount of disturbing explicit content in the treehouse cabin in the Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. This set off a months-long investigation that eventually led to Wood. Forest Service employees had known about the treehouse for about 7 years, but nobody knew exactly who had built it. The last time it had been inspected was nearly 3 years ago. Apparently, it looked like a gingerbread house on the outside. The cabin was dark brown in color and built approximately 8 feet off the ground. There was a porch around the structure, a front door, and windows on the side, as well as a pitched roof and a ladder from the ground to the porch. But when the employee looked inside, he found something startling. On all 4 walls were framed pictures of fairy-like figures, or of what appeared to be younger individuals. The employee took some of the photos to show to law enforcement, and then returned with a detective who then found an envelope that contained more disturbing images, along with an SD card uncovering even more images on it. Eventually, investigators were able to match Wood's DNA to samples collected from a paper cup found in the cabin. Woods was charged accordingly. Recently, I took my kids to Chuck E. Cheese for a birthday. The place was packed as usual, but we got seated in a booth near the front door. We ate pizza, then I made sure everyone cleaned up before heading into the arcade. After that, I just sat on my phone while they did their thing. After a few hours, my phone's battery was running low. I was hoping it could at least last until we were on the way home, but I eventually realized I would need to go out to my car and grab the portable charger I keep in the console. That shouldn't be an issue, because my car was parked near the front, but there was a problem, a major one. As I looked through the window out into the parking lot, I saw a tall, menacing man staring back at me. He had thick, bushy hair and was wearing baggy clothes, making him seem even bigger. He didn't have any business being there, because he wasn't smoking a cigarette or looking through his phone, and nobody was with him either. The man was just standing about 6 feet from the glass, staring into the restaurant. but looking specifically at me. We locked eyes, but he didn't look away. I had to look away myself. I tried not to acknowledge him after that. I was just waiting for him to move on at some point, but he didn't. He kept glancing at the window, and every time, his eyes were still fixated on me. I decided to just suck it up and go out there since my phone was about to die. I got out of the booth and stood up. Then I went to the door. When I got there, I noticed something oddly alarming. Through the glass door, the front of the restaurant seemed clear. The man was gone. I couldn't see him walking away anywhere, and no cars had come by to pick him up. The spot he'd been standing in was suddenly just empty. In fact, the entire parking lot had no one in it, just a bunch of cars, and my minivan just a few rows from the front. All I had to do was walk over and grab the charger, then come back to the safety of the restaurant. So, I slowly opened the door and looked all around, not seeing anyone. When I walked out, I left behind the drowning chaotic sounds of the arcade and entered an almost silent parking lot. As I stepped off the asphalt, I started walking much faster, constantly looking around and behind me to see if the man appeared again. But all I saw was that I was alone. Soon, I made it to my car, unlocked and opened the driver's side door, then quickly leaned inside to reach for the charger. Suddenly, I got pushed all the way in, but when I finally looked back, I froze. The man from outside the window was getting into my car while holding me at gunpoint. Before I could fully comprehend what was happening, he sat down behind the wheel and locked the doors, sticking the firearm in my face the whole time. I was trapped. He ordered me to hand over my keys and purse, so I did. I remember begging him to let me get out and just take my car, but he refused. He said he had plans for me. Then he started the car and began driving away. The whole time, I was looking back at the Chuck E. Cheese, thinking my kids are in there, wondering if I would ever see them again, and if they would still have a mother by the end of the night. I wanted to grab the bastard's firearm, rip it out of his hands and turn it against him, but I was too afraid to try. His fingers never came off the trigger. Eventually, after driving around for a few minutes, he parked behind a closed-down store, out of sight from any other road or building. That's where he went through with his plans. Get in the back seat.
No, please, don't make me.
Are you deaf? Get in the back seat, now!
Please, no! I have a husband. I have children.
Shut up or I'll blow your brains out! This is happening whether you're dead or alive, bitch. So, either I'm going to drag your corpse back there myself, or you're going to get in the back seat.
Okay.
I'm gonna show you how to be a good girl. When it was over, he ordered me back into the passenger seat. Then he got behind the wheel and started driving again. I didn't know where he was taking me. I figured it was to the hole I'd be living in for the rest of my short life. But instead, he took me where I least expected, back to Chuck E. Cheese. There, he dumped me out onto the curb, then drove off. I immediately found help, but I felt like a zombie. I was so numb to everything by that point. My kids hadn't even noticed I was gone. I still don't know how to explain to them what happened. I might never be able to. Days later, I received perhaps the most bittersweet news of my life. The man that kidnapped me had been killed by police at the end of a pursuit. I felt robbed of an opportunity to look him in the eyes as he received justice. But I must admit, I'm glad to know that he no longer breathes. After what he did to me, in a place I thought was safe enough to bring my kids, I will never be the same. This story was inspired by a disturbing Chuck E. Cheese incident that happened on November 18th. A man police took out in an intersection near South Hill Mall was wanted for allegedly kidnapping a woman from the Chuck E. Cheese parking lot and forcing himself upon her in her car. James Salanoa Jr., 22, was identified as the suspect police took out. Police say the woman did not know Salanoa. According to charging documents, the victim was at the restaurant with her 4 children for a birthday party. After returning to her vehicle to get a charging cord, Salanoa opened the car door and pointed a firearm at her. After robbing her, Salanoa drove them around the area before parking and doing the unthinkable to her. Salanoa then demanded the victim withdraw money from her banking account, but that proved unsuccessful. Eventually, Salanoa drove the victim back to Chuck E. Cheese, and he then fled in a stolen Cadillac Escalade. Police were able to identify Salanoa as the suspect through evidence left at the scene. Consulting with the victim through photos taken by a resident in the area from where the Escalade was stolen, police were eventually able to locate Salanoa at the South Hill Park and Ride. He fled the scene in a vehicle with 2 other people. The chase quickly ended at the intersection when deputies deployed spike strips. Salanoa emerged from his vehicle armed. Deputies then immediately took out Salanoa at the scene. This happened in the early 2000s when I was a little girl. Leading up to New Year's Eve, my parents had just bought a brand new computer and kept it in the living room where I was only allowed to use it under their supervision. Of course, that didn't stop me. Whenever I wanted to play games or surf the internet without my parents breathing down my neck, I would sneak out of my bedroom after they fell asleep. At night, I could do whatever I wanted, but the one thing I did most was chat with this girl named Christine who I became friends with online. Over time, we became very close, talking almost every night until we called each other best friends. I opened up about how strict my parents were, while she talked about her parents didn't seem to pay any attention to her at all. We discussed a meeting in person many times, but we discovered that we lived nearly 50 miles apart, which was an impossible distance for either of us to cover at that age. Then, one day, close to New Year's Eve, Christine broke some incredible news. She said her older brother had just gotten his license and could drive. This was a big deal because I could finally meet Christine face to face and hang out with her versus chatting online. We eventually hatched a plan. I had always complained that my parents never let me stay up until midnight on New Year's Eve, so Christine said her brother would pick me up at my house right after my parents went to sleep. He would then drive me over to Christine's, where we would watch the fireworks show in her neighborhood. Then he would drive me back to my house before my parents woke up in the morning. I was excited as hell and felt like a rebel for once. I was tired of obeying such strict rules all the time and being told what I could and couldn't do. It felt good trying something new for once. On the night of New Year's Eve, I waited up in bed until 10 p.m. My parents always fell asleep before then. Soon after, I looked out my window and saw the car parked on the street just past my driveway. That was him, Christine's brother, there to pick me up. I snuck out of the house, then went up to the car and tapped on the window. It opened just a crack, and in the darkness, I could barely see his face. He said he was there to pick me up, just like we had planned, so I got in the back seat. Once inside, I started to feel a bit nervous. I still couldn't quite see what he looked like, so I tried to make conversation, hoping it would make things less uncomfortable.
So, where's Christine?
I don't know.
What do you mean? Is she waiting at the house for me?
I made her up.
What?
Christine is a lie. I made her up.
What? No. Why?
To get to you!
Let me out! Let me out!
By the time I realized I had walked into a trap, I was already racing away from home at 60 miles per hour. There was no way out, no way for me to get the better of him. I couldn't break through the window or find any sort of weapon. I couldn't even try to choke him without pulling my arms away from his neck like they were made of ribbons. To make matters worse, it was the middle of the night, and all anyone was focused on were parties and fireworks. When he pulled into the driveway of his house, there wasn't a single person on the street I could call for help. As the garage door closed behind us, I felt like I was being buried alive. The next thing I knew, he was dragging me out of the car as I kicked and screamed, fighting for my life. He took me into his basement where he tied me up and shackled me to the wall of his dungeon. I was too innocent to know what was about to happen to me, but I was sure it was going to be worse than anything I could possibly imagine. 7, 6, 5, 3, 1. Happy New Year! Oh, my dear sweet wife, don't cry. It's time for the real fireworks. I never left that dungeon, not as the same person I was when I was forced into it anyway. For days, that monster held me captive and kept me in misery, torturing me, destroying me, and taking videos of it all for the internet. It took nearly a week for the authorities to catch up and rescue me, but by then, there was little left of me to free. Allegedly, the police had gotten an anonymous tip from one of his online viewers, which led them to my rescue. My entire life since then has been a slow, agonizing crawl back to a semblance of normalcy. Every New Year's Eve, It feels like I'm right back where I started. On New Year's Day of 2002, a young female named Alicia Kozakevich disappeared from her suburban Pennsylvania home following a family dinner. Suspicions that Alicia may have been lured by someone she had met while chatting on the internet proved to be true. For 4 days, Alicia had been tortured while she was held captive in the basement by a 38-year-old computer programmer who she met in an online chat room months earlier. The horrific images of Alicia's torment in captivity were posted on the internet by her abductor. Authorities were able to track Alicia from an anonymous tip from one of her abductor's online acquaintances to a townhouse in Virginia where they found her chained to the floor with the locked collar around her neck in what Alicia describes as a dungeon. Allegedly, Alicia originally developed a close online relationship with Christine, whom she believed was a 14-year-old girl with long red hair. Alicia later learned that Christine was a 42-year-old man, but in the online world where identity is often ambiguous, Alicia remained friends with Christine. Eventually, Christine introduced Alicia to the man who would later become her abductor. Alicia's abductor is presently serving out a 20-year prison sentence.
My parents left me home alone for the weekend. They gave me a list of chores and a bunch of rules like don't answer the door for strangers, don't have any friends over, that sort of thing. I promised I would do everything they said, but really, I just wanted them to leave. Wouldn't any kid want the house to themselves? Once they were gone, I got to do whatever I wanted. I ate junk food, played video games, and even got to surf the internet on sites I usually wasn't allowed to go on when they were around. Later in the evening, as I was cleaning up and getting ready for bed, I heard a knock at the door. I didn't believe it at first, but I couldn't stand to ignore it, so I snuck downstairs to look through the peephole. I was expecting to see some kids running away from playing ding-dong ditch, but instead, it was a guy in a purple suit. Not having a clue what he wanted, I stayed quiet and out of sight, hoping the guy would just give up and leave. When I put my eye back up to the peephole, I nearly lost my shit, because I saw the man's face pressed right up against it.
I know you're home. Open the door, Michael.
How the hell do you know my name?
The same reason I know you're all alone. Your parents told me.
You're lying. Why would they do that?
Because they wanted me to deliver to you a gift, Michael. Don't you see?
The man then stepped aside, revealing a huge box, big enough for him to fit inside. However, I almost felt convinced this guy was actually a friend of my parents. Despite how frightening it all felt, I ended up opening the door for him. To my surprise, he didn't immediately rush in and attack me like I was worried he would. He just stood there with a huge grin on his face. I then stepped aside to allow the man to push the box inside. After that, he was gone. I immediately closed and locked the door, leaving me alone once again, except for the unknown giant box. Starting from the top, I grabbed a corner of the box and started slowly tearing it down. I uncovered about 2 feet and then I saw it, the face staring back at me. I almost wish it was a human face, but in a way, it was much worse. It was the face of a life-size dummy of Freddy Fazbear. It didn't make sense. I hadn't been to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria since I was a kid. Last time I heard about it, the place was getting shut down. And then, it finally dawned on me. My parents must have bought the real Freddy Fazbear at an auction. Thankfully, he was still in the box, just like an action figure. Surely he didn't work anymore, so I just left him like that and went back upstairs to my room. Earlier, I had planned to sleep, but after that whole interaction, I was antsy as hell. I played some video games for a few more hours until I passed out. However, every time I went downstairs to grab something to drink or eat, I saw it in the corner of my eye. To be honest, it was as creepy as hell. I didn't want to look directly at him, but I wanted to make sure he was still there, and that he hadn't moved like the video games. As far as I could tell, he was lifeless. Eventually, I got tired enough to get into bed. Yet, just as I let my guard down, it started. The noises. The last thing I wanted to do was go down there, so I pulled out my phone to check the CCTV cameras my parents had placed all around the house. Camera 1 was front porch. Nothing. But camera 2 was the foyer, where Freddy was supposed to be. But there was nothing there anymore. It was just a box, but no Freddy. He was alive and loose in my house. Flipping through the cameras like a madman, I found him moments later, standing still in the kitchen. As I kept changing the view of the cameras, I noticed he was getting closer to me. I begged and prayed that he would not be able to climb the stairs. But then, I didn't have to watch to know where he was anymore. As soon as he took the first step, I could hear him. I put down my phone. I couldn't look anymore. There was a camera in the hallway outside my door, but I just couldn't watch. I didn't want to listen either. But second by second, he drew closer, until he finally stopped right outside my bedroom. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed again, checking everywhere, but Freddy had just disappeared. I didn't know where he'd gone, though I couldn't leave the door open, so I stood up to close it.
Somebody help me! He's trying to kill me!
And since this traumatic incident, there have been no signs of life from Freddy Fazbear. The head of the boy has since gone missing. Police searched all through the house and around the perimeters of the house, but to no avail.
Mother, brother, and 3 sisters. Unfortunately, our father has been gone for many years. My brother, being the oldest child and only son, believes this makes him the man of the household, but he's anything but that. He's just a piece of shit. He just bullies all of us, including my mom. When my dad was around, we could at least rely on him to keep us safe. But ever since he left, my brother took control of everything. He easily overpowers us by force whenever he wants. Our only advantage is that we outnumber him, but that doesn't mean he isn't able to single us out when he gets the chance. Recently, however, my mom wanted us to do something as a family for New Year's Eve, so she booked us a hotel room. I don't know where she got the idea from, but I suspect my brother had something to do with it. Or maybe she thought it would help us form a better relationship with him. But as cramped as our house was, the hotel room we found ourselves in that night brought us into a world of absolute hell. The problem started almost right away when we tried to discuss the sleeping arrangements. My brother wanted the big bed in the larger private room meant for parents all to himself, leaving the 4 of us girls and our mother to fight for space on the 2 tiny beds in the main room. When we said that wasn't fair, he grabbed our youngest sister and said she would share the bed with him to make space for the rest of us. This caused everything to explode into madness. We knew he was going to do something horrible to her, and he was clearly willing to trade her for me or either of my other sisters. Our mom, desperate to defuse things, offered to take her place, but he said he would rather die than sleep next to someone as old, fat, and ugly as her. For hours, we fought and fought until it was almost midnight. Suddenly, our mom told us all to stop so we could at least appreciate the whole point of why we came to the hotel in the first place. To watch the countdown to New Year's and the fireworks that followed. We all knew the argument would resume as soon as the show was finished, but everyone seemed tired enough to take a break, even if it was only for a few minutes. So, we all gathered on the small balcony just outside our room. It was freezing, but nobody wanted to huddle together for fear of our brother touching us. For 10 unbearably awkward seconds, we counted down as one family. Then the fireworks started, enough to keep us distracted for just a moment. Sadly, my brother tried to use the fireworks as a diversion. While he thought nobody was looking, he put his hand over my little sister's mouth and tried to pull her back inside the hotel. He managed to close the door on us, almost locking us out. But my older sister noticed at the last second and grabbed the door to keep it from locking. Then my mom joined her and they ripped the door open. Before I knew it, the 2 of them and my older sister rushed inside, leaving the door wide open for me to follow. But I didn't. The fireworks were still going on for a little while. I figured there wasn't any point in trying to change anything anymore, so I decided to enjoy one nice thing in my life while I could. Just when I thought I had a moment to myself, all hell broke loose. I looked back inside moments later and saw my brother with a knife. He charged after my sisters, but my mother jumped in the way to protect them. He then stabbed her without even flinching. When he was done with her, he didn't hesitate to finish what he started. It didn't matter if they ran or fought back. He caught them and was trying to take them all out, stabbing and slicing them one by one. I had to get away, but there was only one way out, down. I climbed over the railing of the balcony and started to make my way to the lower level. But by then, I had already waited too long.
Let's go over this one last time, Mr. Arshad. These bodies, they are your family, correct?
My mother and beautiful sisters. Yes,
And you did these things to them, right?
I poked them and cut them until they were dead.
So you killed them.
I did! At the stroke of the new year.
Okay. And then from midnight until housekeeping found you at 7 in the morning, what were you doing?
Do you really want to know?
Yes.
Do you really want to know?
Yes!
Do you really want to know?
Just tell me! Tell me, goddammit!
Well, it's the holidays, isn't it? We finally had some family bonding time.
A 24-year-old man has been arrested after the bodies of his mother and 4 sisters were found inside a hotel room on Wednesday, January 1st. Mohammed Arshad was detained after he reportedly admitted to taking out his family amid a New Year's Eve dispute. It was mentioned that Arshad allegedly served his family food and drinks containing an unspecified drug before he took them out with a knife. When I was in high school, I was in my first serious relationship with my boyfriend Zach. Our parents didn't let us see each other a lot because they wanted us to focus on school, so I would often sneak out to see him. My dad works nights, so he left the house well before 7 p.m., and my mom would usually pass out around 8. Neither I nor Zach had a car, so we would meet up at places that stayed open late, like Chuck E. Cheese. Chuck E. Cheese was a good place to chill because it had food and arcade games. Plus, it wasn't far from where we lived. It was a 20-minute bus ride from my place and 30 minutes from his. So, one night, when the time was right, I snuck out through my window. Then I made my way to the bus stop to catch the next available bus to Chuck E. Cheese. When I arrived at the destination, I rushed inside to see if Zach was waiting for me, but I didn't see him, so I texted him saying I was here. He then replied saying he was still 5 or 10 minutes out. I sat down in the front area, not wanting to interact with the staff until he arrived. But not long after I walked in, one of them approached me. And not just any Chuck E. Cheese employee either, but the gigantic, creepy rat mascot himself. He came right up to me, towering over me, and started staring down into my eyes with that freaky smile plastered onto his face. I smiled and said hi, hoping he would just leave me alone after.
Hi, Chucky?
Hey there, kiddo! What are you doing here all by yourself?
I'm not by myself. I'm actually waiting for someone.
Oh, really? Are you here with your parents?
No, I'm waiting for my boyfriend.
Then your boyfriend shouldn't have made you come out here all by yourself. It's not safe.
I can take care of myself, thank you.
Hey, I need to tell you something. There's been a lot of creeps here lately preying on little girls like you. You know what? Why don't you come to the back and play with me while you wait?
I'm good. Thanks.
I'll give you free pizza or free tokens, whatever you want.
I'm not hungry and I didn't come to play games. I just came to see my boyfriend. Thanks.
What if you just hang out with me in the back
Get
until...
the hell away from me, you creep!
I was grossed out. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I just got the hell away from that weirdo. I then made my way to the washroom and decided to wait there until my boyfriend arrived. Once I got inside, I locked myself in one of the stalls, then texted Zach, begging him to hurry up. I heard the washroom door open. It could have been a random woman just trying to use the washroom, but something in my gut knew it had to be that mascot creep. I started to panic, trying to keep quiet as I listened for where they were going. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was loud enough that they could hear it, so I opened my phone to call for help, only to see something that actually put me at ease. It was a text from Zach saying he had arrived. Then it was followed right after by a selfie with the same Chuck E. Cheese mascot. I was relieved. Whoever was in the washroom with me must have just been a random woman after all. Relieved, I stood up and opened the stall door, only to see a sight straight out of my nightmares. It was a half-naked man standing right in front of me. For a split second, I stood there in shock as this deranged psycho stared back. Then he charged at me. He shoved me back into the stall and started grabbing me, pinning me against the wall. I screamed as loud as I could before he put his hands over my mouth. I tried biting off his fingers, kicking him and clawing at his eyes, but nothing I did made a difference. Out of nowhere, a giant set of hands appeared over his shoulders and grabbed him. They ripped him back far enough for me to get free. Then I ran out of the washroom, straight into my boyfriend. A few seconds later, the half-naked man plowed through the washroom door and bolted out of the building. Then, the Chuck E. Cheese mascot came out after him, and I finally realized what was going on. The mascot was genuinely trying to warn me earlier about the creeps lurking around Chuck E. Cheese, but instead, I mistook him for one of them. Despite that, he still saved me, and I think if he wasn't in that bulky suit, the real sicko wouldn't have escaped him. Thankfully, the creep was arrested the next day. There was more fallout afterwards as well. I got put on an even stricter lockdown than ever when my parents found out what happened. That, coupled with the words the mascot told me starting to ring truer by the day, led to Zach and I breaking up. It really was a stupid plan for me, a young girl barely in high school to go out at night alone like that, and I suffered for it. This story was inspired by a creepy incident regarding a man who was arrested after reportedly walking into the woman's restroom at a Chuck E. Cheese in Manassas and started to take off his clothes. According to police, officers responded to the Chuck E. Cheese on Streamwalk Lane a little before 5 p.m. on Sunday, January 26. For a report about indecent exposure, police discovered that a man, later identified as 24-year-old Zion Marquise McCone, had gone into the woman's bathroom at the Chuck E. Cheese where he proceeded to remove his clothes before an employee intervened. McCone left before police got there. During the investigation, officers identified McCone as the suspect and found that he had previously trespassed at the business. McCone was arrested without incident the next day. He's been charged with indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, and trespassing. What I'm about to talk about still creeps the hell out of me. It happened around Christmas a few years ago. I live by myself in a small town with a population of just a few hundred people. I have very few neighbors, but the ones I do have, I know fairly well. We look out after one another whether there's a storm or utility outage, or anything like that. Like I said, this all went down during the holidays, so everyone in the neighborhood had their porches and front yards decorated with tinsel, Christmas lights, and that sort of thing. Everyone except my next door neighbor Mark. Mark didn't exactly celebrate Christmas. In fact, he was kind of the black sheep of the town. Some people even shunned him due to rumors that he was gay, but none of that ever made a difference to me. I didn't want to be like everyone else and judge people over things like that. Anyway, the guy lived literally right next door to me, so I always tried to be cordial. We often ran into each other outside and made small talk, but that's all it ever led to. Mark would frequently invite me over for dinner at his house, but I always made an excuse not to go. I didn't want him to get the impression that I was interested. I would kindly just tell him that I was busy or say something like, maybe next time. Fast forward to Christmas time, and nearly a decade of peace and quiet suddenly went out the window, as more and more weird things began to happen. Every other night, I would notice a car pulling into the driveway next door, and it was always a cab dropping a man off at Mark's house. Now, I was no stranger to seeing his flings come and go from time to time, but that was honestly very occasional. I tried not to give it much thought, but I must admit, it was just weird as hell. Of course, it truly wasn't any of my business, until something extremely disturbing happened one night. I remember being fast asleep when all of a sudden, I was woken up by the sound of someone banging on my door. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it had to be serious, so I got up to check. When I opened the door, I saw a guy I could only describe in that drowsy state as a grown-up, and kind of a washed-out Charlie Brown. He just had that look to him, with the big round head, thinning hair, and helpless attitude. Immediately, he started begging me to help him, even trying to nudge his way past me into my house. I stopped him at the door, and as I saw my neighbor Mark approaching us, I started to gather what was going on.
Please, you have to help me. Don't let him near me. Who? Mark? What did he do? Hey, don't worry about him. He's just overreacting. Look into my eyes. Does it look like I'm overreacting? I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure I want to get involved. Just let me stay in your house until my Uber gets here. Is that okay? Sure.
At that moment, the last thing I wanted to do was ask questions. I just wanted to get the guest out of town so we could all go back to bed. The three of us just waited around my porch for about 20 minutes in awkward silence. Then the guy's ride came to pick him up. The awkwardness was almost over, but of course, Mark made sure to invite me over for dinner before leaving me alone. I found it stranger than usual, as it was almost midnight, but I kindly declined like I always did. Back inside, I went upstairs to my bedroom, but before laying down, I pulled my blind slightly open and glanced out my window. What I saw that night, I still sometimes see when I look outside my house. Mark was standing on my front lawn, looking right up at me. His fists were balled up, and he had this pissed off look on his face, just like a spoiled toddler that didn't get what he wanted. For a grown man, it was a scary sight, but I sensed that by helping his date escape whatever they were engaged in, I had unmasked my neighbor's true nature. I don't know if he ever looked away that night, as I eventually couldn't take it anymore and closed the blinds on him. After that, I avoided Mark for the rest of the holidays, and he seemed to be avoiding me as well. I didn't hear anything from or about him until a few days after Christmas, when shit really hit the fan. Suddenly, I looked outside, and Mark's house was surrounded by cops. There were helicopters in the sky and news crews all over the place. I had no idea what Mark had done until a reporter told me so she could get a reaction out of me for an interview. According to her, Mark had lured that same Charlie Brown-looking man back to his house and killed him. Even worse, Mark didn't just murder him, but he ate him too. All those years, I had been living right next to a cannibal. Looking back, it makes me sick to think about all those times he invited me to dinner, knowing how many other men had visited his house. I have to wonder just how many other victims he had other than the man I met. I'm just glad I wasn't one of them. On December 24th of 2019 on Christmas Eve, a 25-year-old man named Kevin Bacon was taken out by Mark Latunsky, a 50-year-old man he met on Grindr, who had a long history of severe mental issues. Allegedly, Latunsky castrated Bacon and ate some of his remains. After Bacon didn't show up on Christmas Day to spend time with his parents, a search went out. When the recovery of Bacon's car, wallet, and cell phone led investigators to the Grindr app, and subsequently to Latunsky's doorstep, the perpetrator let them in without complaint. There, on December 27th, they found Bacon's dead, mutilated body hanging upside down from Latunsky's ceiling. Latunsky freely admitted to investigators that he had stabbed Bacon to death, and then castrated him and ate from his remains. Latunsky's attorney says Latunsky suffered from severe delusions about his identity, and even claimed he was of royal family lineage. Between his arrest and trial, Latunsky's attorney said never did Latunsky express any remorse. Last year, my son was very clear about wanting to celebrate his birthday at Chuck E. Cheese, so I made it happen. When we got there, the place was packed, way busier than I'd seen in years. It was also in the middle of the summer, and the arcade was full of crazy-looking new gamers, so it was a hot spot for younger people. For all I knew, 10 different kids were celebrating their birthdays at the same time. There was only one thing I saw that made me regret taking my son there. It caught my attention almost as soon as we arrived. From all the way across the building, there was a huge rat mascot of Chuck E. Cheese. That was the name of the business, but something was very wrong with this one. It didn't look like what I remembered as a kid, or even what I had saw when I took my son there just a few years ago. At first, I couldn't even tell if it was real or not, as it looked like it could be a guy in a suit, or maybe just a dummy. Either way, it was staring dead at us. despite being as far from us as it could possibly be. After I stared at it for a few seconds, it finally raised its hand and waved. I awkwardly waved back, as well as my son. He said something about it being an animatronic, so I figured that's what it was. Just a robot set to face the door and wave every few seconds at the people coming in. Finally, we were met by the hostesses and led to a table on the restaurant side. We sat down and ordered some food and drinks. Then I let my son loose into the arcade. I had no interest in trying to keep up with him, but I came prepared with a crossword puzzle to occupy myself while he did his thing. Of course, I couldn't forget about the Chuck E. Cheese mascot looming over everyone. He was always visible in the same corner, but every time I looked up from my puzzle, he was closer than before. No matter where he appeared, he was always looking at me. Eventually, he came a little too close, standing just a few feet away from my table. By this time, night had fallen, so the large section of windows at the front door of the building showed a slight reflection of everything inside. The mascot had finally stopped looking directly at me. Disturbed by how close the mascot had come, I decided to get up and use the bathroom. I did it very suddenly to see how he would react. Sure enough, the reflection in the window showed me he was following me. I didn't know what else to do but just walk even faster. Then I came to the small dead-end hallway that led to the bathrooms. The woman's restroom was on the first door to the left, but before I went in, I turned around and looked behind me, and that's when I saw the mascot had followed me all the way there. He was standing just a few feet away. I couldn't believe it. I could only hope that he wouldn't follow me into the bathroom, but I already felt cornered. I tried backing away through the door, but then he suddenly lunged and grabbed me. I kicked and screamed at him, punching and thrashing until he let go. The whole place stopped and froze to look at the scene as I immediately made my way to find a manager.
Somebody help me! Excuse me? Hello? Who's in charge here?
That'd be me, ma'am.
Your mascot just attacked me. He tried following me into the bathroom.
Well, did he enter the bathroom?
No, but he grabbed me right outside of it. He was probably gonna drag me in there and
Ma'am, there are children here. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Right, Germ?
You people are disgusting. Where's my son? We're leaving.
Ma'am, you still have to pay.
I'm not paying after getting fondled by a giant rat. I hope this place burns to the ground.
Once I grabbed my son, I stormed out of there. I was madder than hell in the moment, but by the time I got home and cooled off, I decided to just let it go. It didn't seem like the right idea to drag the whole thing out by pressing charges. We carried on with the birthday celebrations at home and forgot about the whole thing. That was until about 2 days later, when I realized my credit card was missing. When I checked the statements and found out it was being used, someone was trying to buy hundreds of dollars worth of shit on my card. I reported it stolen, not thinking it had any connection to what happened at Chuck E. Cheese, until I was informed of the identity of the person who had stolen my card. It was a guy named Jermel, who just so happened to be the same Chuck E. Cheese mascot from my son's birthday. Turns out, it wasn't even the first time that guy had been caught committing credit card fraud, but it made me think differently about what happened at Chuck E. Cheese. The whole time, I'd been thinking he attacked me because he was some kind of pervert trying to cop a feel, but in reality, it was all just a smokescreen to steal my credit card. Thankfully, he got arrested, though at work and in the Chuck E. Cheese mascot suit, which was weird but relieving. Ever since then, I feel like I can't trust anyone anymore, especially at Chuck E. Cheese. This story was inspired by a bizarre incident regarding Florida cops who arrested a Chuck E. Cheese mascot. On Wednesday, officers descended on a Tallahassee Chuck E. Cheese on reports of a stolen credit card, narrowing down the suspected thief to an employee who was inside the costume. Authorities believe Jermel Jones, who was dressed as the Chuck E. Cheese mouse when they arrived, stole a customer's bank card and used it to make fraudulent purchases. According to a police report, the owner of the bank card had used the card during her daughter's birthday party at the location last month. When she noticed some fraudulent charges, she decided to take matters into her own hands. The documents allege she visited one of the locations that showed up in her irregular bank statements and obtained surveillance footage of a man making one of the purchases. She immediately recognized the suspect as an employee at Chuck E. Cheese, the documents say. When police arrived, Jones was handcuffed and escorted to a patrol car. He denied having the bank cards and claimed he didn't know anything about the fraudulent purchases. Police later found a stolen bank card in their search, as well as a receipt allegedly matching one of the reported purchases. Photos and footage of the arrest have lit up the internet, with many questioning why police didn't have Jones remove the costume before he was placed under arrest. Jones was charged with 3 felonies. I suffer from PTSD relating to an incident I was involved in decades ago. When I first heard about Five Nights at Freddy's, I didn't realize the lore was so heavily inspired by that very same tragedy. By the time I discovered what the game was all about, I'd already dug too far. It all started back when I first worked at McDonald's. However, for the sake of simplicity, I'll just call it Freddy Fazbear's. As usual, I was working the night shift. I took orders, cooked the food, served it, cleaned, and did just about everything. Even though it was only a Wednesday night, it was the middle of the summer, so we were quite busy. I made pizzas and poured drinks for customer after customer, keeping the place going. For context, this wasn't just the average crummy chain restaurant. We were actually popular. Fazbear's was a place for people to hang out, especially young folks. Teenagers were always searching for stomping grounds, guys for places to hit on chicks, broke couples for cheap dates, and we were all of that to all those people. Unfortunately, my shift took a sharp left turn when this older guy randomly walked in. The best way I can describe him is that he looked like Jeffrey Dahmer, but at least 30 years older. He honestly looked horribly out of place, especially not at Fazbear's around people half his age. The way he smiled made him look mentally ill, and everything about him was just eerie. Of course, I tried my best not to judge as the man came up to the counter, but when I asked him how I could take his order, our interaction only made me more suspicious of him. For several seconds, he didn't even say anything. He just stared at me with these empty, unfeeling eyes. He then reached into his pocket, pulled out some change, and placed it on the counter while locking his eyes at me. It seemed like little more than a crumpled 5 and some coins. Regardless, it didn't line up with what he ordered when he finally spoke.
I want a large pizza with lots of room for red sauce.
Sir? We can give you extra sauce, but $6 isn't enough.
Shh. I'll be back very soon. And when I return, I expect to see an extra large pizza. The biggest size you have. Enough to hold more red sauce than you've ever seen.
I don't know if I could do that, sir.
Before I had time to get into it with him, he just left. He walked right out of the restaurant, leaving his money behind. I was completely baffled. That guy just gave me the creeps. But aside from that, treating me the way he did in front of all the customers annoyed the hell out of me. I hated feeling embarrassed by entitled people, but just to keep him from coming back and embarrassing me again, I decided to make his pizza. In order to make sure it was done to his liking, I left the register in the hands of a coworker and went back to make the damn thing myself. After I stretched the dough as far as it would go, I slid it into the oven to par bake so all the extra sauce wouldn't make it soggy. As I stood by the oven, I was staring at the floor and listening to the noise of the restaurant, when suddenly, I heard the unthinkable. Explosions, gunshots, dozens of them, even hundreds, followed instantly by a wave of screaming. I dropped to the floor on instinct, not knowing where any of it was coming from. There was panic in all directions. I had to figure out what the hell was going on, but I didn't want to go near it, so I got to my knees, stayed low, and rushed to the back office. Once inside, I closed the door and locked myself in. The monitors for all the security cameras in the building were inside that office. I looked through them and saw what was happening in the restaurant. It was that same creep. Every camera I checked, every angle I saw, he was in it, with multiple firearms on him, taking people out right in front of my eyes. I picked up the phone next to the monitor and called 911. I told the operator what was happening, and once I knew the cops would be on the way, I got the hell out of there. So I went straight for the back door and ran for my life. The cops arrived at the building minutes later, but the shooter wasn't done. He wasn't taking hostages, and he wasn't surrendering. After a 2-hour standoff, during which that monster continuously slaughtered innocent people, he was finally taken down by a SWAT sniper. When it was all said and done, over 20 people were dead, all customers of mine. I could never go back. Decades later, this Five Nights at Freddy's was released, and I come to find out it was allegedly inspired by this incident. It's made my PTSD come back with a vengeance. The pure dread and terror, the guilt and shame of the things I could have done differently. It's all resurfaced because of Five Nights at Freddy's. It's been notoriously known that the FNAF game creator has stated that the game's themes were inspired by tragic events, such as the 1984 San Ysidro McDonald's massacre, which involved a mass shooting. The incident occurred at a McDonald's restaurant in the San Ysidro neighborhood of San Diego, California, on July 18, 1984. The perpetrator was 41-year-old James Huberty, who fatally took out 22 people and wounded 19 others before being taken out by a police sniper, approximately 77 minutes after he had first opened fire. Prior to the tragic event, it was said that James calmly informed his wife that he was going to hunt humans. A few minutes later, he went out and did what he did at the McDonald's restaurant. The tragedy remains the deadliest mass shooting in California till this day.
Every Christmas, I can't stop thinking about something that happened to me around this time of year. It's the most infuriatingly terrifying thing I have ever went through as a deputy. A life-or-death experience with a psychotic gingerbread man. I don't call him that because he had some obese obsession with cookies or because his house was made of sugary cardboard. I call him that because of how he taunted us with that damn nursery rhyme. I'm the gingerbread man. Catch me if you can. We've been after this guy for weeks. It was December, or as some people say, robbing season, so burglaries were up, but not like this. We had a string of devastating home invasions, dozens of families and livelihoods destroyed, terrorized by a burglar who seemed to care more about traumatizing people than stealing their belongings for money. At one point, we thought we had him cornered. We studied his habits, found a vacant home, staged it as the perfect bait. The second he broke into the property, the deputies on watch called us in. Half the force came to surround the house. I parked on the street corner just down the block, near a patch of trees. I listened to the radio as the first deputies charged in, hoping to catch him by surprise. But then, the bastard weaseled out of the house. Seconds after hearing the call out, I saw the perp fleeing. He was headed for the woods, so I got out of my car and chased after him. I was the closest one to him and the faster runner on the force, so I caught up to him just as he cut in between the trees. I wasn't letting him out of my sight. I knew he'd been running for longer than I had, so I just had to wait for him to get winded. Then I had a chance. As soon as he started to slow up, I went through my options. I could shoot him, but even after what he'd done, did that make it okay for me to take his life? I could tase him, but if he remained a moving target, my chances of hitting him with a shock were even worse than with a bullet. Finally, when he got within arm's reach, I just grabbed him. I took hold of his elbow as it swung back and I yanked it. He tripped, fell into the snow, and I immediately crashed on top of him. I thought for sure I had him. I thought there was no way he had it in him to keep going.
Stop! You're under arrest! I'm the gingerbread man! Catch me if you can!
Suddenly, his arm slipped out of my hands, and that's when he started using my face as a punching bag. He attacked me with everything he had, and even whipped me with some tree branches nearby. And then, out of nowhere, the perp charged and immediately landed another hit, and then another, until I staggered backwards, trying to regain my equilibrium. But the next thing I knew, he was on top of me. In an instant, the odds turned against my favor, and now I was struggling to keep him from doing me in for good. His hands went to my holster. I felt him pull at it, trying to get the gun out. I put both hands and everything I had to keep him from taking it. Finally, I heard the shouting and footsteps of the other deputies pursuing us. Backup. The perp heard it too, and he gave up on trying to take my gun. He gave one last smug look before getting off me and running deeper into the forest. Then, a moment later, the others arrived. Someone stopped to help me as the others remained in pursuit. While badly beaten, I was able to get to my feet and rejoin the search effort. After that, the evening continued to devolve. We chased after him, fighting through a maze of trees, and then the storm rolled in. The snow buried our boots, and the freezing wind froze us to our cores. Not even the helicopters, with their blinding spotlights, could catch a glimpse in the flurry of manic weather that hindered us. The bastard got away, and then to add insult to injury, he posted that infamous message on Facebook.
They call me the gingerbread man. Catch me if you can. I'm running as fast as I can.
We were humiliated, but none worse than me. We mobilized even stronger as soon as the weather cleared. It took a few more days, but that bitter sting of a failed sting operation wouldn't let us rest until we caught him. At last, we tracked him down to a sinister hideout, an occupied home which he had broken into but seemingly never left. We surmised he must still be hiding somewhere in there, lurking in some dark corner. With a chip on my shoulder, I was among the team that found him in the attic. There was nowhere for him to run then, and I wasn't alone either. In the face of our overwhelming numbers, he gave up without any more fighting. Yet, he wouldn't stop smiling at me. I'll never forget that look on his face, the face of the gingerbread man. The Gingerbread Man is a children's story about a cookie that runs away from those who try to eat him. But in this case, police say they've caught the real Gingerbread Man, a Pittsburgh area burglary suspect who referred to the nursery rhyme in taunting authorities who couldn't catch up to him. Police say 25-year-old Heath Emery Miller was trying to hide in the attic of a home where police found him on Wednesday. Emery is wanted on several warrants for multiple burglaries. On Monday, he escaped into the woods after police thought they had him cornered. At night, Miller posted on Facebook, saying, "They call me the Gingerbread Man. Catch me if you can. I'm running as fast as I can." Miller was arrested and charged accordingly.
One year ago, I was celebrating the final day of 2024. It would soon be 2025. My girlfriend and I wanted to celebrate New Year's Eve in New Orleans. We'd been there for Mardi Gras a few times, so we knew what to expect. The streets were packed. Parties spilled out of every building in sight. For the countdown to New Year, we made our way to the center of it all, Bourbon Street. We were as drunk as anyone there. The crowd was electric, almost overwhelming, but it felt so worth it just to be a part of something so amazing. As we counted down the last fleeting seconds of 2024, the energy amplified beyond belief. There was cheering and chanting, phones and cameras everywhere trying to capture the final moments of what had been one hell of a year. Finally, the clock struck midnight, and 2025 was here. Fireworks erupted from all directions and exploded overhead. As I leaned over to give my girlfriend a kiss, our moment was cut short by a sudden shift in the air. The cheers turned to shouting, then screaming. The year was less than a minute old, yet something was already wrong. If the crowd hadn't been so dense, we might have seen it sooner. Over my girlfriend's shoulder, I saw the first of many sights from that night which still haunt me. The crowd of people on the sidewalk behind her were panicking as a pickup truck plowed through them. Acting on pure instinct, I grabbed my girlfriend and jumped out of the way. We fell through the air as the truck flew past us. I held onto her as tight as I could, but just before I hit the ground, I felt her slip out of my hands. After landing on the ground, I immediately looked back at her, but she wasn't there. Her body was tumbling across the pavement, and that's when I realized the truck had hit her. It continued down the street, running over person after person in a mindless rampage. Then it stopped and began to turn around. It wasn't safe to go back on the street, but I couldn't leave her there. I had to get her out of the way before the truck came back to hit her again. I scrambled to my feet and ran to her, but the closer I got, the more I could see the extent of what had been done. Her clothes and skin were shredded. Her arms and legs slumped like a rag doll. Her face was looking up, right at me. Her neck was broken. I'll never forget the expression stuck on her face. That dull, confused shock, like she didn't even have a second to realize what was going on or even feel pain. As I stared down at her, watching the color of life still draining from her skin, I wanted to collapse, break down, scream in agony, but it had to wait. Not far away, I heard the truck revving and screeching, barreling towards me all over again. I panicked and ducked into the first alleyway I saw, just seconds before that monster blew past. That time, I caught a glimpse of the man behind the wheel. There was unbridled rage in his eyes, but not quite insanity, just pure evil. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was never going to stop until all of us were dead. Cowering in that alleyway, my mind grappled with reality. It had all gone to shit so suddenly. I was bearing witness trapped and powerless as that monster circled back and forth, murdering innocents with every pass, grinding the remains of his dead victims into the asphalt again and again. Eventually, it had to come to an end. The cops finally surrounded the truck, yet the psycho wouldn't quit. I watched as he stepped out and opened fire on the police without a moment's hesitation. He wounded a couple of them, but within a few seconds, they took him out. The instant he hit the dirt, I felt a wave of compulsion. I ran out into the street and right to my girlfriend. I wanted to be with her even though I knew she was gone. Looking back though, seeing her again after she had been run over so many more times was probably a mistake. In the aftermath, I was inconsolable, convinced it should have been me that died, not her. I should have just shoved her out of the way instead of trying to save myself too. I had to explain to her family the way she died, expecting to be torn to pieces for failing her. However, those who could manage to speak told me it wasn't my fault. There was only one man responsible, the man driving the truck. His name was Shamsuddin Jabbar. The police found a terrorist flag in his truck, as well as several videos he posted just before the attack. In them, he pled his allegiance to that evil cause, plainly stating what he planned to do. In the end, over a dozen people were killed that night, and many more suffered life-altering injuries. The funeral for my girlfriend was held a week later. Today, as New Year's Eve approaches once more, these memories have resurfaced, as crystal clear and painful as the day they were carved into me. If it is even possible to celebrate New Year's Eve at this point, I will be doing it alone.